Hi, I'm Steve Mouzon, and I have with me today Stefanos Polyzoides. Steph, great to have you here. Question for you. Recently, I've worked as a consultant with you on a couple of offshore projects, which were in really exotic places, the projects are. And it seems like that post-meltdown, there's actually a lot more work offshore than there is in the U.S. What are the differences, both with the process of how you do the work and also the implications for new urbanism when you're working in a place that there really hasn't been any new urbanism before, maybe?
All right. You know, as American professionals, we've had a very checkered track record working abroad. By that I mean that most of the destruction of traditional places abroad has been brought about by the rather unthinking work of American consultants plying their wares in a place that is open to their modernist imaginings and modernist theories. And the new urbanism, I think, in principle, is a theory and a practice that is based on focusing one's energies on what is appropriate from a cultural, from an environmental, from an urban point of view for all these places in the world. I would say that if I could reduce, you know, a year's work into a couple of important subjects, that when one works abroad, the temptation is to, particularly in a second world country or a third world country, the temptation is to say, you know, I know everything, you don't know nothing, and I'm going to impose this all on you. And I think the truth is that there is a lot of wisdom, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of care, there's a lot of living experience and construction experience and an understanding of place has gone on for hundreds of years in these places, thousands in some cases. And it's important to listen as a consultant and make sure, which is I think something we did, and make sure that you know where to budge or bend and when to impose. I mean, that's probably true in the United States as well, to some extent, that you really want to working in a place, bring in ideas and innovate and design, while at the same time receiving input and information that is really modifying or would modify potentially your point of view or your attitude or even your specific design. So an example would be, for instance, in Mauritius, that in subdivisions, there is so little public realm. Actually, there's no public realm at all in the islands because people are just packing it all in for the sake of what they think is security and for the sake of efficiency and economy, for selling the most. So how do you go in there and say, oh, by the way, we need sidewalks, we need public realm, we need planting, we need all kinds of things to happen? Well, the answer is it has to be the idea of the public realm as we understand it in America modified. So this is an example of actually bending to cultural practices and planning standards. You therefore build a street that is narrower than it would be in the US, that has no sidewalks, but people walk in the street in a resort situation with no traffic, where actually the parking strip is the planting strip, they're overlapped, and so on. Yeah. So you end up with a language of road making, for instance, which is nothing like you've seen in the United States. Right. Because it is certainly the same principles and the same theory, but a significantly different practice.
The method I have the best luck with in terms of trying to quickly absorb stuff is through the lens of a camera. But in your case, what is your best way of tapping into the ethos of the place?
Well, I think it's an extraordinary question because the camera gives you a lot of evidence. I think the right hand and the pen and the sketchbook gives you an awful lot of evidence, but there is nothing like listening and talking to people and not talking to one person, but talking to multiple people and trying to cross-reference their input. And you recognize very fast that there are by far more nuanced understandings of issues in these places than you would ever imagine through a very stereotypical view from the United States or by asking the first three people you run into in the street. And to complete my previous point, because these 2 points are related, there then comes the moment in which you say, but people, you cannot do a 20-acre district in an airport and not get direct access through the airport road. And they say, but we have a 20-acre, a 20-foot or 30-foot, strip that's not ours. We've given to the state for the expansion of the road. And then you say, well, what about turning this road, which is a motorway for miles, but in the last quarter mile, dead ends at the airport? What about doing a boulevard there? And they say, well, it's a good idea, but we don't have boulevards in our planning book. See, and we say then, well, get boulevards in your planning book. Right. So all of a sudden, while I spoke before about bending and adapting to local conditions, this would be one in which you have to see the local conditions, if not, to say it more aggressively, to impose on a local condition, because without half a dozen such preparatory infrastructural public space, building code issues, you'd never be able to build what needs to be done in a place. Like, listen, most of these places have been forgetful, given up their heritage. They're working through magazines and television and computers as we do. And they're petroleum dependent. So they're driving and air conditioning themselves to death like we are. So the big question that we faced together was, how do you regenerate this tradition, which is probably part of a whole other discussion.